And here's a packet of tea, and there's sugar, and some matches. And if someone will get 2 or 3 loaves out of the crock over there in the corner.
What are you doing, Mrs. Beaver? Exclaimed Susan.
Packing a load for each of us, dearie, said Mrs. Beaver very coolly. You didn't think we'd set out on a journey with nothing to eat, did you?
But we haven't time, said Susan, buttoning the collar of her coat. She may be here any minute.
That's what I say, chimed in Mr. Beaver. Gets along with you all, said his wife. Think it over, Mr. Beaver. She can't be here for a quarter of an hour at least.
But don't we want as big a start as we can possibly get, said Peter, if we're to reach the stone table before her? You've got to remember that, Mrs. Beaver, said Susan. As soon as she has looked in here and finds we're gone, she'll be off at top speed.
That she will, said Mrs. Beaver. But we can't get there before her, whatever we do, for she'll be on a sledge, and we'll be walking.
Then we have no hope, said Susan.
Now don't you get fussing, there's a dear, said Mrs. Beaver. But just get half a dozen clean handkerchiefs out of the drawer. Course we've got a hope. We can't get there before her, but we can keep under cover and go by ways she won't expect, and perhaps we'll get through. That's true enough, Mrs. Beaver, said her husband. But it's time we were out of this. And don't you start fussing either, Mr. Beaver, said his wife. There, that's better. There's 5 loads, and the smallest for the smallest of us. That's you, my dear, she added, looking at Lucy. Oh, do please come on, said Lucy. Well, I'm nearly ready now, answered Mrs. Beaver at last, allowing her husband to help her into her snow boots. I suppose the sewing machine's too heavy to bring. Yes, it is, said Mr. Beaver. A great deal too heavy. And you don't think you'll be able to use it while we're on the run, I suppose? I can't abide the thought of that witch fiddling with it, said Mrs. Beaver, and breaking it or stealing it as likely as not. Oh, please, please, please do hurry, said the 3 children. And so at last they all got outside and Mr. Beaver locked the door. It'll delay her a bit, he said, and they set off, all carrying their loads over their shoulders. The snow had stopped, and the moon had come out when they began their journey. They went in single file. First Mr. Beaver, then Lucy, then Peter, then Susan, and Mrs. Beaver last of all. Mr. Beaver led them across the dam and onto the right bank of the river, and then along a very rough sort of path among the trees right down by the river bank. The sides of the valley, shining in the moonlight, towered up far above them on either hand. Best keep down here as much as possible.
Alright. It says, what are they gonna use? It says, but we can't get there before her, whatever we'll do, for she'll be on a what? What is she, yes Tommy, what is she gonna?
Sledge.
Yeah, she's gonna be on a sledge, right? And then what are they gonna be doing, Tommy? Walking, perfect. Mia, what does Miss Beaver want to bring with her that she thinks maybe she shouldn't be bringing with her, but wants to bring it with her for a certain reason? It's on like the last end of the page. Starts with an S.
Oh.
So we,
Facts and laying it on the table.
it's gonna be right about. What does that say?
Sewing machine.
Sewing machine. Why does she want to bring it?
Because she wants to sew or something.
She wants to sew something, yes. But she specifically wants to bring the sewing machine, so what? So the witch doesn't do something to it.
Yeah.
What does that say?
Breaking it or stealing it.
Yeah. Would you like someone breaking or stealing your things?
No.
Especially your squishmallow right here, right?
No, it's a snackle.
Snackle. Sorry. Correction. Your snackle. If I just grabbed it, how would that make you feel?
Sad.
Yeah, it make you sad. You're like, no. So that's why she's like, I'm gonna bring my sewing machine, so the witch isn't gonna take it. Let's see. I think that's good for now. Let's continue reading. Good job, guys.
She'll have to keep to the top, for you couldn't bring a sledge down here.
Turn the page.
It would have been a pretty enough scene to look at it through a window from a comfortable armchair. And even as things were, Lucy enjoyed it at first. But as they went on walking and walking, and as the sack she was carrying felt heavier and heavier, she began to wonder how she was going to keep up at all. And she stopped looking at the dazzling brightness of the frozen river with all its waterfalls of ice, and at the white masses of the treetops, and the great glaring moon, and the countless stars, and could only watch the little short legs of Mr. Beaver going pad, 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 pad through the snow in front of her, as if they were never going to stop. Then the moon disappeared, and the snow began to fall once more. And at last Lucy was so tired that she was almost asleep and walking at the same time, when suddenly she found that Mr. Beaver had turned away from the riverbank to the right and was leading them steeply uphill into the very thickest bushes. And then, as she came fully awake, she found that Mr. Beaver was just vanishing into a little hole in the bank, which had been almost hidden under the bushes until you were quite on top of it. In fact, by the time she realized what was happening, only his short, flat tail was showing. Lucy immediately stooped down and crawled in after him. Then she heard noises of scrambling and puffing and panting behind her, and in a moment all 5 of them were inside. "Wherever is this?" said Peter's voice, sounding tired and pale in the darkness. I hope you know what I mean by a voice sounding pale.
No.
"It's an old hiding place for beavers in bad times," said Mr. Beaver, "and a great secret. It's not much of a place, but we must get a few hours' sleep." "If you hadn't all been in such a plaguey fuss when we were starting, I'd have brought some pillows," said Mrs. Beaver. It wasn't nearly such a nice cave as Mr. Tumnus's, Lucy thought. Just a hole in the ground, but dry and earthy. It was very small, so that when they all lay down, they were all a bundle of clothes together. And what with that and being warmed up by their long walk, they were really rather snug. If only the floor of the cave had been a little smoother. Then Mrs. Beaver handed round in the dark a little flask, out of which everyone drank something. It made one cough and splutter a little and stung the throat, but it also made you feel deliciously warm after you'd swallowed it. And everyone went straight to sleep. It seemed to Lucy only the next minute, though really it was hours and hours later, when she woke up feeling a little cold and dreadfully stiff, and thinking how she would like a hot bath. Then she felt a set of long whiskers tickling her cheek, and saw the cold daylight coming in through the mouth of the cave. But immediately after that, she was very wide awake indeed, and so was everyone else. In fact, they were all sitting up with their mouths and eyes wide open, listening to a sound, which was the very sound they'd all been thinking of, and sometimes imagining they heard during their walk last night. It was a sound of jingling bells. Mr. Beaver was out of the cave like a flash the moment he heard it. Perhaps you think, as Lucy thought for a moment, that this was a very silly thing to do. But it was really a very sensible one.
He knew he could scramble to the top of the bank among bushes and brambles without being seen. And he wanted above all things to see which way the witch's sledge went. The others all sat in the cave, waiting and wondering. They waited nearly 5 minutes. Then they heard something that frightened them very much. They heard voices. Oh,
Tommy.
thought Lucy. He's been seen. She's caught him. Great was their surprise when a little later they heard Mr. Beaver's voice calling to them from just outside the cave. It's all right, he was shouting. Come out, Mrs. Beaver. Come out, sons and daughters of Adam. It's all right. It isn't her. This was bad grammar, of course.
Alright. What are they carrying that's really heavy? What do you think it is? Let's, Brian, what do you think that they're carrying that's heavy?
Presents.
Yeah, maybe presents, about like things to keep them safe on their journey, right? How about, where does Mr. Beaver go? Yes, Tommy?
Outside, and maybe I have a theory that maybe it's Aslan.
Hold on, let's wait. I'm asking, I asked a question. My question was, where did Mr. Beaver take them?
Outside.
I'll give you a hint. It said he's in an old hiding place.
Burrow.
Yeah, it's
I
like
didn't
a
know you were
burrow
talking
where,
about it.
yeah,
I
like the
didn't know
hole in
you
the
were
ground.
talking about that.
But right here, it says what? It's for beavers and what? Bad times, right? Nice. When you're scared, where do you think you're gonna go? Are you gonna hide under your what? Go ahead.
Hide where any place you will hide. You don't have the opportunity to make a nice house. You gotta fuck the hideout and fast.
Yeah, right? Jake, where's like a hiding place? When you play hide and seek at home?
They don't play hide and seek in my home.
You never played hide, what about outside?
I don't know.
Maybe hide behind a tree? What is,
No.
Mia? What is it that they drink out of? What is it called?
A little flask.
Yeah, a flask. What does it make them feel?
Safe a little bit, like calm.
Makes them feel calm, but it makes it says they feel what? Deliciously,
Warm.
yeah, after they swallow, right? And then what do? They go straight to
Sleep.
nice. Alright, let's continue. Good job, guys.
That is how beavers talk when they're excited. I mean, in Narnia. In our world, they usually don't talk at all. So Mrs. Beaver and the children came bundling out of the cave, all blinking in the daylight, and with earth all over them, and looking very frowsty and unbrushed and uncombed, and with sleep in their eyes. Come on! Cried Mr. Beaver, who was almost dancing with delight. Come and see! This is a nasty knock for the witch. It looks as if her power is already crumbling. What do you mean, Mr. Beaver? Panted Peter, as they all scrambled up the steep bank of the valley together. Didn't I tell you, answered Mr. Beaver, that she'd made it always winter and never Christmas? Didn't I tell you? Well, just come and see! And then they were all at the top, and did see. It was a sledge, and it was reindeer with bells on their harness. But they were far bigger than the witches reindeer, and they were not white, but brown. And on the sledge sat a...
I'm gonna pause really quick. When you see a sledge and you see reindeers, what time of year do you think it is? Christmas, right? Nice job, Brian.
Any
person
kind of
whom
beer.
everyone knew the moment they set eyes on him. He was a huge man in a bright red robe, bright as hollyberries, with a hood that had fur inside it and a great white beard that fell like a foamy waterfall over his chest. Everyone knew him because though you see people of his sort only in Narnia, you see pictures of them and hear them talked about even in our world, the world on this side of the wardrobe door. But when you really see them in Narnia, it is rather different. Some of the pictures of Father Christmas in our world make him look only funny and jolly. But now that the children actually stood looking at him, they didn't find it quite like that. He was so big and so glad and so real that they all became quite still. They felt very glad, but also solemn. "I've come at last," said he. "She has kept me out for a long time, but I have got in at last. Aslan is on the move. The witch's magic is weakening." And Lucy felt running through her that deep shiver of gladness, which you only get if you are being solemn and still. "And now," said Father Christmas, "for your presents. There is a new and better sewing machine for you, Mrs. Beaver. I will drop it in your house as I pass." "If you please, sir," said Mrs. Beaver, making a curtsy. "It's locked up." "Locks and bolts make no difference to me," said Father Christmas. "And as for you, Mr. Beaver, when you get home you will find your dam finished and mended and all the leaks stopped and a new sluice gate fitted."
Sluice gate?
Mr. Beaver was so pleased that he opened his mouth very wide and then found he couldn't say anything at all. "Peter, Adam's son," said Father Christmas. "Here, sir," said Peter. "These are your presents," was the answer. "And they are tools, not toys. The time to use them is perhaps near at hand. Bear them well." With these words, he handed to Peter a shield and a sword. The shield was the color of silver, and across it there ramped a red lion, as bright as a ripe strawberry at the moment when you pick it. The hilt of the sword was of gold, and it had a sheath and a sword belt and everything it needed, and it was just the right size and weight for Peter to use. Peter was silent and solemn as he received these gifts, for he felt they were a very serious kind of present. "Susan?"
Alright.
Oh my wow.
Could you imagine Santa Claus giving you a shield?
What do you think is happening to the witches? Hmm? Oh. There's 1 minute left of class. We'll have to finish this later.
You can review.
What?
Still ask them questions.
I still ask questions?
Yeah.
What do you think is happening to the witch's power?
It's probably like weakening or something.
It's weakening. What happened? So what happened? To why what's happening to why the witch's power is weakening? What is always happening? There's like a season. Yes, Tommy.
Oh, shoot.
What?
Shoot.
Well,
Right.
think about it. Jake,
Yeah, I've been winter.
it's always winter, right?
Yeah.
And what are we seeing that isn't winter? It's kind of winter per se, but it's like a certain person. We're hearing Santa. Make sure to raise your hand, Mia, so we all get a turn. Tommy, yes?
Santa, because she didn't let him in before.
Yeah, Santa, and he starts giving presents. What kind of presents does he give Peter? Yes, Jen.
A sword and a shield.
A sword and a shield. And what did he say? He was almost solemn. And why was he solemn? Because he said it was a very serious gift. He needed to take it serious. It's going to be something he uses to protect himself. Alright guys, thank you so much for your help.